So I have one sole purpose here today, to introduce Mayor Jacob Frey. So I'm not going to go through his bio. He's got an impressive bio, but one thing that you might not know about him is he actually was an elite long-distance runner. So he knows that the steps we take today are going somewhere, and there's a long-term outcome. There's a long-term goal. So let's make the best of those steps through this conference, and let's set those steps the right direction. So I'm just going to read a couple of statements from his statement on priorities. He was only elected a year ago, so he's just starting out 1 year in. But a couple of priorities. A strong commitment to racial equity starts with a commitment to investing in affordable housing. How we set our budget reflects more than policy priorities, it reflects our values. Everybody who wants to live in a great city should have that opportunity. Lower-income residents currently have little choice when it comes to where they afford to live due to the history of intentionally concentrating affordable housing in specific neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods often see fewer investments in transit, education, and opportunity. That should change, and I will fight to make sure it does. So with that, I want to introduce the Mayor of Minneapolis, Mayor Jacob Frey.
Good morning. For those that are not from Minneapolis or the Twin Cities region, I want to welcome you to Minnesota. We really have a spectacular city here in Minneapolis and in the greater Twin Cities region. We have a whole lot going for us right now. You know, we have the greatest park system in the entire country. We've been ranked #1 for I don't know how many years now, 3, 4, 5 years running. We have what is known to be the healthiest city in the entire country. We have an activist and engaged population that's fully capable of enacting the change they envision. We're growing like gangbusters. We are exceedingly progressive. I think we're very good looking. We have a whole lot of things going for us. And so I figured I'd get those things out of the way right up front, because I also want to acknowledge where we're falling short. We are falling dramatically short in terms of racial disparities. We have in our cities collectively about 100 years worth of intentional segregation, 100 years worth of restrictive covenants that run with the land, 100 years worth of disinvestment from communities of color, 100 years worth of very intentionally separating some of these communities from some of their most vital assets, like the Mississippi River by a whole lot of heavy industrial followed by a massive highway. These decisions were made intentionally, and we need to make sure that the precision of our solution matches the precision of the harm initially inflicted. And that harm was precise. And so I'm so proud to speak here today at EcoDistricts. And first, let's give a huge round of applause for Briante setting this whole thing up, doing an extraordinary job. And thank you to Eric Muschler for your work as well. I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. Give him a round of applause as well. Now, this work right now, more than ever, is exceedingly critical, recognizing that cross-section between ecology and racial justice, between sustainability and economic development. There is a symbiosis between these different factors that may be seemingly diverging at first, but as you know, and I know I'm preaching to the quiet here, they're not at all. They are intrinsically linked every single step of the way. And so we have a whole lot of issues that we need to be dealing with right now in Minneapolis, and a whole lot of it focuses on that cross-section between poverty and pollution, those cross-sections that I just mentioned a second ago. And although we have a lot of struggles, you know, there are things that we collectively as a community, as government, as our business community, as a nonprofit community, we are exceedingly committed to, because we know when you garner those partnerships citywide and in the region, that's when you have the biggest opportunities to succeed. So, for example, we have 3 priorities right now in my administration. It's economic inclusion, it's affordable housing, and then it's police-community relations. I'm predominantly going to be focusing on the 2, affordable housing and economic inclusion. We could have an hour and a half conversation about, at least about police-community relations, so we'll save that. But first on economic inclusion. Right now in the Twin Cities region, we have a workforce shortage. In other words, we're producing more jobs than we have people or talented workforce to fill them. In fact, as of just a few months ago, we had over 100,000 job vacancies, over 100,000 job vacancies, which is a staggering figure. And we need to be doing two things. We need to be, yes, attracting talent abroad, but first and foremost, we need to be making sure that every single person, every single kid, every single person throughout our Twin Cities, regardless of who you are, who your parents were, what side of the tracks you grew up on, has the opportunity and the necessary skills and the necessary upward mobility to fill these jobs. Because if we don't, not only is it the wrong thing, not only are we continuing to exclude communities of color and our indigenous population that we've done, by the way, for like a long time, but it's also really bad for our economy as well. We stand to lose as much as $31 billion, that's with a B, by 2040, if we don't make sure that every single person throughout our Twin Cities is included and has the necessary upward mobility to scale a great idea, to become an entrepreneur, to become a CEO. You know, we're not talking about, I mean, communities of color, our indigenous populations. This is not like just the entrepreneurs and the creative class and the artists and the CEOs of tomorrow. These are the entrepreneurs and the CEOs and the creative class of right now. We need to recognize that, and we need to fulfill the promise that we all purport to want and we talk about so much. And so there's a number of things that we're working on to further that. You know, first, I think we need to be looking at where and how capital is flowing in our Twin Cities, making sure that as we are growing, it's not just going to the privileged few, it's going to everybody. So I'm all about growth. I want to grow this city. I'm all for business and economic development. Bring it on. But we want to make sure that everyone is reaping the benefit. And so one of the first things that we were looking at was capital and specific money. We're talking about money, finance. And so in my first budget, which we proposed, I don't know, like a month ago, it will be hopefully adopted in this December by our city council, we proposed a really significant investment in our first and our only, right now, black-owned financial institution. It's called Village Trust Financial Cooperative. It's actually now called Village Financial Cooperative. I think the name recently changed. And they are doing just an exceedingly good job of making sure that we are breaking down these barriers that have traditionally existed for communities of color in our financial institutions. And, you know, this is where it all starts. You know, if you aren't able to get a loan, if you aren't able to secure a mortgage or put down a down payment, you can't possibly own a home, which is one of the best levers to building generational wealth. If you can have the best idea in the world, but if you're not able to scale that idea in an economically feasible fashion, then you're not going to be able to run with it and become the entrepreneurs and the CEOs that I was just talking about. Not to mention our economy is going to suck because of it. You know, and so we have this obligation, and I think a big part of it starts with finance. That's not all we're doing. We're also working on cultural districts and cultural corridors, making sure that as we grow, as investment comes in, it's not pushing out some of the business owners of color for instance, North Minneapolis on West Broadway, that have made some of these communities awesome to begin with. You know, what I want you to see when you're in Minneapolis, and we're getting there, but we got a long way to go. I want you to be able to walk down the street and have 1,000 different tastes and smells and sounds and people all packed in on the same block. That's what makes a city great. That's what makes a city thrive. That's what makes you all who aren't from here want to come back again. You know, it's that beautiful collection of everyone, all on the same block. Not segregated out neighborhoods where, you know, you got one population over there and that population. Yeah. No, I want all of us to be together. I mean, and the truth is that we're a long way off from that, but we can get there. We're also working on significant investments in terms of geography, but it's got to be focused on people. One of them is Upper Harbor Terminal. Upper Harbor Terminal is a presently and previously industrialized area. It's an area that's separated North Minneapolis from our riverfront. And by the way, pretty much every single other community throughout our city has access to water. Minneapolis is I think one of the things that makes it great is we are this beautiful city in a park. We are in the park. And everybody has access to lakes, the riverfront, with the exception of North Minneapolis. And so we want to bridge that gap, provide that access, get over that highway and through some of the industrial space and transition some of that industrial space into an eco-district, into an area where we've got a combination of both sustainability as well as economic development right at that same juncture. But it doesn't stop there. These areas of poverty, we're often seeing a cross-section of pollution and poverty. In fact, so much so that some areas, we're seeing some of the greatest asthma rates in the entire state. And this has gotten to a point where you can quite literally predict a person's likelihood of having a heart attack or cancer or whatever by the age of 50 simply based on the zip code in which they were born. That's not okay. And so we're doing a number of things to push back on it. As a council member, I authored an ordinance that tied pollution to fees. So for every pound of pollution that you're emitting into the atmosphere, you're now charged a fee. By the way, most of that pollution is in one area of the city, just so happens to be the area that has probably the most highest percentage communities of color. And so in 1 year alone, after introducing this fee, we reduced carbon output by 4 million pounds, and criteria pollutant output, criteria pollutants are the really nasty ones that give you cancer and lead poisoning, all that, by I think it was 18,000 pounds. And so that's a start. That's a start, and we have a long way to go. But what I appreciate about EcoDistricts is you are thinking holistically about the big vision and what we can be doing. So it doesn't just end with economic inclusion. That's a gigantic part of it. And by the way, I want to recognize Sean Pierce, who's leading our economic inclusion effort. She's right here in the front. If you could just give her a round of applause. The big secret is, if you think that a great idea just came out of my mouth, it's probably not my idea at all. It probably comes from someone on my staff, and Sean is leading the way there on economic inclusion. Second big issue is housing. Housing has always been my passion. And we have an affordable housing crisis right now in the city. We have a whole lot of people want to live right now in Minneapolis, and we're really proud of that. But when you have a whole lot of people that want to live here, you don't have the supply to accommodate it. The prices continuously get jacked up, values go up, rents rise out of control. And again, the people that made these neighborhoods wonderful to begin with get displaced. And so what I believe in is a couple things. One, I do not believe in putting affordable housing all in one area of the city. I ran on this platform last year when I was running for mayor. It got inaugurated this January. And I thought I was going to get my ass kicked because I was talking about putting affordable housing in rich and middle-income neighborhoods. And people voted for me, and we're going to do it because I believe. Thank you. I believe in a. I believe that neighborhoods are beautiful when we're all living together. I believe that we've got to push back on the very intentional segregation that we've seen for quite a long time. And yes, that likely means that affordable housing will be going in or around your backyard, somewhere around. And by the way, it's a good thing. It's a very good thing because when you have a rich diversity of people in different socioeconomic backgrounds, when you have 1,000 different tastes, when you have 1,000 different people at the table, that's when great entrepreneurship takes place. That's when great ideas come together, and that ultimately is when our city is really going to rock. And so we're going to be pushing for deeply affordable housing, deeply low-income housing at that 30 and 40 and 50% area. We've traditionally done a whole lot of affordable housing at what's called 50 and 60% of area median income. That's great. It's like workforce housing, but we also need that deeply affordable housing at the 30% of median income area. If you spend any time in the Twin Cities, you'll know that we do have a homeless crisis as well. And we've got people who are homeless that are working. You know, they're working, but they can't make up the gap between a cost of a shelter and the cost of the deepest affordable housing that we have in the city. And so we collectively are perpetually keeping them as homeless. You know, not only is that the wrong decision, you know, housing is a right. I believe that housing is a right. It's also financially pretty dumb because it costs about 3 times as much to keep a person homeless cycling through hospital stays and sometimes jail and shelters than it does just to give them a home. So we've got a ton of other things that we're working on. You know, we got this green business cost share program that's killing it right now, where we're enabling some of these businesses to make economic advancements while also accounting for the environment. We got programs out the wazoo. I don't want to talk your ear out for too long. But what I do want to make sure that we're doing is partnering together. There's a whole lot of extraordinary ideas that are going to be generated in this room, and we want to take advantage of them. So as you have ideas, let us know. As you feel opportunities to partner, make sure it happens. And I can't wait to partner with all of you. Thank you so much. Are we doing questions? And is that right? And I think we're opening this up to questions now. But let's hand it over to Briante, the myth, the legend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, we weren't planning on doing Q&A, but they told me you love questions, so I was like, we got to give you a couple.
Okay.
Does anybody in the audience have some questions that they want to ask? It's the mayor, you know, it's a big opportunity, big chance.
Hi, my name is Richard. I'm from Los Angeles, but I did my undergrad at St. Olaf here in Minnesota, so I love the Twin Cities. In Los Angeles, we're also facing one of the largest homelessness crisis in the country, where the HUD has reported that our homelessness population has increased by 30% over the last 2 years. And when speaking with developers, the number one issue that always comes up is just building for the middle class is expensive. Land parcels are very expensive in downtown, but yet we're facing a 26% vacancy rate in downtown. What has been your strategy in getting investors to invest and look away from the return on investment, but rather look on the return on community?
Well, it's a great question, and thank you, Richard. So we have a similar crisis, albeit not at the same scale as LA does with respect to homelessness. You know, here's the truth. No one is going to do anything where they're like voluntarily losing money. You know, and so whether it's a developer or otherwise, they're not going to be able to come in and then with every project lose money. Now, we can reduce whatever the profit margins are, and they are able to do that, and we're encouraging them to do so. One of the many things that we're looking at is inclusionary zoning and some form of incorporating of some affordable housing into all development projects that go up. The truth is that that'll tackle some of the issue, but it won't tackle all of it. We need to be subsidizing. And so, you know, as part of my budget, we put about 3 times the previous record amount of money into affordable housing, which is $40 million. But the truth is that at a time when we are losing CDBG, Community Development Block Grant funding from the federal government, at a time when we're losing a lot of our 4% and 9% low-income tax credits from the state, and I guess to a certain extent the federal government as well, which was our traditional source of funding, I believe that it's incumbent on cities to step up. You know, where you've got gridlock at the state and federal legislature, I believe that cities can be kind of a laboratory of democracy where you try out new things and you figure out how best to tackle a problem head on. And so it's 1, subsidy. It's 2, yeah, it's supply as well. We're not experiencing the same dynamic where you've got vacancies. In fact, our vacancy rate is like under 2%. It's really, really low right now. And so what we're doing is allowing for a diversity of housing options in many different neighborhoods where it was previously restricted all to, like, you know, mansions in certain areas of the city. And we want that beautiful diversity, and that's how we're going to attack it. You know, will it work? Well, we'll see in a couple years, I guess, 3, 4, 5 years. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, one question here.
Good morning. I'm Marita Bougeot, and I've been working with the folks on the north side about the Upper Harbor Terminal project, as well as linking that back into the community's economic development. And they've done some really remarkable things. They've taken real leadership in their community to build a local food economy from the ground up, including a system for nurturing the youngest generations to become really interested in having a food economy that works. But the next step we realize is that this can't be grant funded. That's what everything is for these local food systems. We need to actually have something that is much bigger. And so we've actually come up with a state bill that could help local food systems create a food web that brings all of our communities together across regions and divest from the industrial food system. And it really came out of this idea from North Minneapolis that we have to have healthy food.
That's right.
We have to have community development that is about the community themselves benefiting and participating in that. So I'm wondering, I didn't hear you mention anything about food and our eco-districts, but I think food and water can be our real leverage for making change because we all need it. So I'm wondering where you are with that. And would you support a bill that would help us nurture those partnerships between rural and urban communities to have a long-term sustainable food system? I'd love to talk to you about that.
So the answer, would I support a bill? Yeah, absolutely. I always like to read my bills first before I decide whether to support them, but based on everything that you're saying now, this sounds right up my alley. And the reason we didn't mention it is, and Sean, I'm sure will be kicking me for this in a few seconds, is it was one of the items that I actually left off on the bullets. But you're absolutely right. Some really unique and innovative solutions are coming right now out of North Minneapolis, and it's specifically around the areas of food justice. We have areas of our city, and that's one of them, where they are food deserts, especially with respect to locally grown and healthy fruits and vegetables. And so there's a number of things that we're working on. And you mentioned, this can't just be, nonprofit grant-funded kind of thing, and you're absolutely right. So right now, we have about 370 some odd vacant parcels that are city-owned on the north side alone. Actually, I think it's right around 350 right now because we've been expediting the process of selling them off. So 350 now, was 370 very recently. And even if you account for every single parcel that is potentially developable where you could have a home of some sort on it, even if you account for all those, there's still a gigantic chunk of them that are not developable, that won't be generating long-term tax revenues. And if you were to tackle that segment, which, by the way, we're talking about, I don't know the exact number, but I'd guess it's somewhere around 100 parcels, which is, you could have an excellent opportunity to build urban ag, or to do urban ag. And one, I think it generates sustainable food sources. Two, I think we should not just be pushing them off for community gardens. Community gardens are great, but as you mentioned, I want people who are living there to be able to make money off of the fruits and vegetables that they're selling. So the ability to write down the cost of rent and allow a farmer to buy, soil and hose and, I'm not a farmer, so whatever the farmers buy, that kind of thing, it's expensive, and so you're not going to be able to purchase these things that farmers buy and be able to do it sustainably unless you know that you'll have a 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 year lease in some cases. So we are pushing in that direction right now, and that's just kind of one part of the equation to make sure that communities are better, in fact, connected to the ground that they should own. And I'll just finish up with this. So after embargoes and trade restrictions were placed on Cuba, I don't know how many years ago, there was an inability of Cuba to get larger amounts of food, at least from other industrialized areas. And what Cuba decided to do was mandate, and I'm not advocating for Cuba's system, but what I am advocating for is this. What they did is they mandated that basically every arable piece of land was used for growing food, like fruits and vegetables. And very shortly thereafter, what they found is that large percentage, I mean, Cuba, they were eating like kings and queens because they had that direct ability to have their hands in the dirt. They were reconnected to the soil on which they were living. And at the end of the day, I think it made the whole country a lot healthier. So yes, I think we can learn from that.
Alrighty, well, I think that's all the time that we had. Everybody give a hand for Mayor Jacob Frey.
Thank you again for having me, and thank you so much for your work.